Thank you, Reverend Tony, and thank you everyone for coming to see and hear my talk today and be in fellowship as a Course in Miracles student. We're all kind of Course in Miracles students. And all of our brothers and sisters on ACM Gather who are joining us here today as well. And also Nick for the great song that you brought to us. And a shout out to, since this is my first time that I'm speaking here at the 875 Post Student Housing, and for Reverend Rudy for manifesting this and helping us to make this happen as well. Okay, so the title of my talk today is Your Brother's Sinlessness Will Set You Free. And of course, as we all do when we are thinking about giving talks, speaking here at the Community Miracle Center, wherever we may be, a lot of times we try to emphasize, what is it that is happening in our lives, and what is it that we see projected in that great movie screen, that we often encounter today on TV or the internet or social media or whatever it might be. And so my talk today is motivated by kind of like events in the world that have happened since the 2007 financial meltdown, and my own experiences with authority in my workplace. As you know, one of the important teachings of A Course in Miracles is that the root of all evil is authority. It's the reason for the separation, because the Course in Miracles does teach us that we, in fact, our first decision that manifested the world was one of separation, was against God, against the one reality. So the first thing I want to kind of get into is this concept of what will set us free. What is freedom? And freedom is a very compelling word. If you look out at personal transformation throughout history, for individuals and for societies and humanity, it's been a rallying point for everyone. And I really believe it is that our spirits yearn to be free. And one of the reasons why our spirits yearn to be free is because we perceive ourselves to be burdened. And sometimes we're burdened by internal things, guilt, responsibilities, things like that. And sometimes we're burdened by external forces. We're burdened by systems, human systems, maybe political systems, economic systems, right? Social service systems, things that seem imposed upon us. And so we seek for different types of freedom. Some of the freedoms I think I see people attempt to achieve in their lives include economic freedom. We all want to have economic mobility. We want to be able to move up the income scale. Many of us do. We seek for wealth. We seek for comfort. That's one type of freedom. Another type of freedom that we seek for is political freedom. And throughout history, we have many examples of people yearning for political freedom. Our own nation, our own revolution in 1776, the French Revolution, and revolutions in Africa, the colonial revolutions, where they overthrew the European colonial powers to establish their own. And of course, the First Amendment, freedom of press, freedom of speech, assembly, religious freedom. All these are important. But the highest form of freedom in my mind is spiritual freedom. The reason I believe that is because it represents the highest form of freedom, because it's a release from all the concerns of the egoic body and of the egoic psyche. What we are attempting to do when we seek spiritual freedom is to release our minds from guilt and fear. We are attempting to decide in every situation. We're attempting to decide for love, for God, and for our Creator. So that's kind of what I see. Now, in today's reading that Reverend Vincent read, says this: reason will tell you that the only way to escape from misery is to recognize it and go the other way. And if you do the reading today, it says, and go the other way is in italics. Okay? So it is telling us that very clearly there are two choices in every choice that we're making. there are two choices to go the other way. So let me now talk to you a little bit about an experience that I recently had at work. So this, as many of you know, I'm department chair of special education department in a large San Francisco high school, George Washington High School. And this year started with me attending a professional development amongst 700 of my colleagues, and we were given a presentation which I felt was not really acceptable, and I stood up and took on my superiors, the assistant superintendent of schools as for San Francisco Unified School District. And we had a back and forth in front of all of our colleagues, and it was quite an experience for me, and there was a lot for me to learn in that circumstance. But what I realized is that even though I had a disagreement with the authority figure, I wasn't really in fear of them, and I didn't really see them as being wrong. I didn't perceive them as being wrong, I just didn't agree with the content. I didn't agree with what was being presented. And it was very interesting because people came up after me and said, "Oh, if they're going to come after you, we'll have support. The union will be behind you, and all this kind of stuff." And I was coming from a point of the Course in Miracles, right? And the Course in Miracles is really a discipline of moral absolution, right? It really believes that if you're coming from love, if you're seeking a higher principle, if you're seeking oneness, you're going to be okay. And I had that experience. And in fact, I went up to the people afterwards, the assistant superintendent and another person who I was talking to, and people from the California Department of Education, and I talked to them, and I explained to them it was not personal. This event, which was controversial, wasn't personal. I was just attempting to express my point of view about the circumstances and what was being taught. So again, each of us is guided. Now, just recently there has been another situation in my workplace where we have had, a very difficult case. I deal with students with disabilities. We have a student in our school who has a very significant disability, and in fact the disability is terminal, that they have a disease that is going to shorten their life significantly. And the cases that involved has resulted in a conflict between the professionals at my site and the parents of this student. And the conflict has gotten so bad that the parents chose to hire a lawyer to advocate on behalf of their point of view about how the services should be delivered to their child. And as a consequence of that, we have been, I've been in constant, as the department head supervising the case, I've been in communication with the case manager teacher who works with this student. And, every time, every step of the way, I've been saying to this, to this teacher, case manager, who's very good, I said, okay, so what's the point? What's the principle here? What are we trying to advocate for? And each time we worked through the situation and felt that we were trying to do in the best interest of the student. It wasn't in conflict with the parents in terms of seeing them as wrong or bad or anything like that. But we did have this situation. So they got to the point where myself and this teacher had to meet with, the district lawyer and my supervisor at the district level. And we had a meeting. She was very well prepared. She had a 10-page document to demonstrate why we felt we needed to do what we were doing. And we met with the lawyer, and they asked us questions, and hard questions, and and even at the end, the lawyer said, "Well, I think you have a reasonable case." About a week and a half later, we heard through the grapevine that the district had decided to settle the case and side with the parents, and we're going to have to do what the parents would have to do. So, needless to say, it was actually a Wednesday that I had class here. By the time I teach the Wednesday night class, by the time I got to the class, I couldn't even focus on the course. I was enraged, because I felt that it was the wrong decision. But I wasn't quite sure, why was I so angry about this situation? Now, I'm a Course in Miracles student, right? But I know that when you have rage like that some of that is with the ego. So I didn't do anything, at the moment, even though I wanted to. And And, the next day, what I did is I got into school, and like my guidance was coming to me at that point, I was asking Spirit, even though the ego was very powerful at that time, I was asking Spirit for help. What should I do in this circumstance? And what I was guided to do was write an email to the assistant superintendent of schools, who is the person that provided me with the information, not provided my principal with the information through which I found out, and also through the director of special ed for San Francisco Unified School District. So I wrote, and I just CC'd everyone involved in the case, and I presented a case. I explained to them, why I felt the decision was inappropriate, and what I felt was wrong about the way in which the decision was inappropriate or wrong, if you will. And that's what I did. And as I was writing it, I explained a little bit that I felt like there had been autocratic decision-making, that they hadn't communicated to us why they made this decision, essentially. That's what happened. And also, I said in there, okay, I got to the point where what is it, besides my critique, what is it that I want, right? What is it that we want, me as the department head? What is it that I want? And so I was thinking, I want, part of my mind was saying, well, I'm going to list our demands, right? And I said, no, I'm not going to say demands. Here are our reasonable requests, okay? And I listed 3 items. And essentially what the items were was that I wanted us to pursue the next step of the process. Win or lose. We realized that going to a court or mediation, you can lose in those circumstances, right? Well, we wanted that. And we also wanted an explanation about the decision. So that's essentially summarizing what it is that we wanted. Well, and that was like a Thursday. And by Monday, I actually got a response from the director of special education. And the response was wonderful. The response explained why they made their decision. And it was actually pretty good. She said the reason that we made the decision that we did was because the federal courts almost entirely side on this rule in favor of the parents. And even in the past, when they have taken strong cases on behalf of what the school district felt that had strong cases, they've sided with the parents. And she also added a few other reasons in there, like for example, when you do take a case to court involving teachers and paraprofessionals, teaching assistants, and so on, it takes them out of the classroom for a long period of time. So you're actually doing some harm to the education process as well. So here it is. I thought, wow, this is great. So I gave a response, and there were some things in there I disagreed with. I don't need to get into details, but I did mention them. But I also thanked her. I said, thank you for this beautiful and thoughtful response. You really took the time to explain. And I said, that's what we needed. That was the missing piece. It was the communication piece. Okay? So I thought, wow, this was a great, great healing. And then just this past week, the assistant superintendent of high schools, who was part of this, came out and met with myself and the teacher and the principal involved. And he was wonderful as well, and heard us, and we were able to exchange, share what we felt. He shared his experience as well. And it was really a great healing for all of us to have this. And so, I guess my thought about it is that, we are going to have authority problems, because that's what the whole world, if you think about the Course in Miracles, is based on. We are going to have authority problems with the state, with the institutions, with people at work that are authorities, with presidents and kings and queens. Okay, we're going to have all these kinds of things. All right, but what we have to do, I think, as course students, is come from this place of moral absolutism. Now. And so I thought, hey, here it is. I didn't really have a lot of fear in the situation. I was coming from this place as a long-time course student, and the Holy Spirit took care of it, right? The situation is going to kind of work itself out. Did we get what we wanted? No. We didn't get the outcome that we wanted, but the process played itself out, and we did what we were supposed to do. So I thought that was really, really interesting. Now, the other thing that comes to mind is this, is that, as I said, since the financial crisis of 2007, which we find ourselves, still kind of experiencing, there have been a lot of challenges that we as a country have faced. Currently, as many of you know, we have a new president, President Trump, and many of us have, a variety of perceptions about President Trump and what's going on. And I was thinking about that and in relation to this authority problem, and I thought to myself, this is what I really thought about. One of my heroes, and I talked about this before, is this guy named Socrates. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Socrates influenced Plato, and Plato formed an academy of philosophy known as the Plato's Academy, and out of that formed a philosophy known as Neoplatonism, which is actually something that influenced the Christian mystics and is influenced, I'm pretty sure, well, it did influence Jesus, because Jesus in the Course of Miracles refers to Socrates' stories about the allegory of the cave. So, sometimes we think about Jesus and we think, oh, he's this enlightened being. Well, wherever Jesus was in his enlightenment when he came to this planet, he did in fact learn things while he was here. And my personal belief is that, yes, he became enlightened or awakened in that lifetime, but he also stood on the shoulders of giants. And I think he took things from the Greek philosophy. And one of the things that the Greek philosophies taught was this sense of moral absolutism. And that's what the Course is. Do you remember what the reading says today? It says, when you see error, when you see sin, go the other way, right? It's saying there's a clear choice. Reason, which in my mind is a synonym for Holy Spirit or love, right? Reason tells us, go the other way. Don't wander into temptation. So, what does this mean? Well, what it informs me is that as we look at our current political circumstances, I think President Trump does have a purpose in our system. I think he has come here to rile the system up, to turn everything upside down. And that doesn't mean that I don't agree with most of what he does. And I think that it calls for us, when we're in the circumstances, just as when I'm at my job and I'm advocating for what I think is the moral principle, that I do that. It's the same thing for all of us as citizens of the world, of humanity, is that when we're in those circumstances, that we stand up and we say what we believe. He's saying what he believes from his belief system, and if we believe that that is wrong and we're in a situation to do something, then we can do it too. Now this brings me back to Socrates. So Socrates, as some of you know, was put to death by the city-state of Athens. Now, some of you don't know this. Socrates was actually an experienced soldier. He had fought in wars, the Peloponnesian War, to get rid of the Spartans, to put down some of the invasions that were taking place within the city-state of Athens. So he was a skilled military guy. He also was quite a good drinker as well. So, but I think he let that go a little bit later in life. So he was accused. Essentially, what he was accused of later in his life was he was accused of corrupting the minds of the youth. Now, being a teacher, I understand this kind of concern you can have sometimes because some things you say get taken out of context. But really, what he was trying to get. He saw himself as a citizen of Athens, and it was his job to bring moral absolution to the state. He saw that the state, he felt, was trying to pursue power and wealth and comfort and bodily pleasures over moral integrity. And in fact, he was put on trial. He was found guilty, and he was put to death for this. When he got his sentence, this is when he issued this famous line: "The unexamined life is not worth living." And what he did is, in ancient Athens, the way they did their juries is at that time they got 200 citizens would sit and listen to the cases. And this was a big case because Socrates was a very influential person in Athens. And he told the jurors this. He told them that by you putting me to death, because I am challenging what you're doing as Athens is doing as a city-state. Athens at that time was the most powerful city-state in Greece, and perhaps the most wealthy city-state in Greece as well. And he was telling them that they were doing some things wrong. And that's all he was doing. He wasn't attacking them in terms of, he wasn't hurting any of their economy, he wasn't harming people. It was ideas that he was putting forth. And this is what he told them. And like Jesus, he did not oppose his death. He was put to death by the state, but he did not oppose it. As a matter of fact, what happened is at one point, the elders of Athens were actually said, they basically put him in a jail, and they said, okay, one night they said, hey Socrates, we know we're going to give you this hemlock tomorrow, and you're going to die, but the jail door is open right now, and if you want to sneak out and go live somewhere else, please go. Okay, they wanted him, they didn't want that. They didn't really want to put him to death. And Socrates said no. He said, because if I do that, then I'm undermining my own integrity. I'm a citizen of Athens. I've fought for Athens. I've defended the ideas of Athens. And if this is the will of the people, I will abide by it, even though on principle I will be opposed to it. Now, if you think about it, when Jesus was alive, Jesus could have struck a deal. Okay? He could have struck a deal. Jesus was an enlightened guy. Okay? He was not unaware of what was happening to him. He could have got Caiaphas from the Pharisees and said, hey, let's go sit down, I won't talk about this, or I'll go over here. Or Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate especially didn't want to crucify somebody who he knew didn't do anything wrong, right? So, he did that. Now, we know, or what we know about Jesus in terms of that time, it appears as if Jesus didn't publicly oppose or give a sermon about his death sentence. But we know by what happened from the story, and we know from the Jesus in the Course in Miracles, he called it the last useless journey, because he was awakened. He had no longer any guilt. He told us he didn't suffer, but he was willing to be the demonstration for us of holding that moral absolution in the face of external circumstances. And that's what we do every day. And we've had many, many people throughout history that have done these things. We've had many, many mystics. The Course in Miracles says this: all you need to do is dwell in the quiet here with Christ, is share his vision. Quickly and gladly is his vision given anyone who is but willing to see his brother sinless. So, what I admonish and request for all of us to do, see our brother sinless, speak our peace when the Spirit tells us to speak it, and live humbly. That's my talk for today.